Turns out, AI predicts aspirin-exacerbated respiratory disease. Your nose knows things about you that you don't know about yourself yet. Right now, in the cells lining your nasal passages, there's a molecular conversation happening that could predict whether a single aspirin tablet will send you to the emergency room gasping for air. Scientists just figured out how to listen to that conversation. They built an artificial intelligence system that reads the genetic whispers in your nasal tissue and says with stunning accuracy whether you have a disease that might kill you before you even know you have it. The question is, should you want to know? Here's the thing about aspirin-exacerbated respiratory disease, or AERD. It's not some rare curiosity. It's a genuine asthma variant that hits about 1 in every 50 asthma patients, somewhere between 200,000 and 900,000 people in the United States alone. And it's brutal. People with AERD develop chronic nasal polyps. Their airways stay inflamed. Then they take an ibuprofen for a headache or an aspirin for chest pain, and their respiratory system betrays them spectacularly. Within hours, sometimes minutes, they're struggling to breathe. Some end up in intensive care. Some have died. The catch? Nobody can diagnose it reliably until it happens. Doctors have been struggling with this for decades. The standard diagnostic approach is basically a shrug and a gamble. A patient comes in with asthma and nasal polyps. The doctor runs through some criteria, maybe runs some blood tests, and if the pattern fits, they tell the patient to avoid NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. But a lot of people have asthma and nasal polyps who don't have AERD. And a lot of people with AERD don't look that different from anyone else with moderate asthma. So you end up with false positives and false negatives. Some people are told to avoid painkillers they actually can tolerate. Others think they're fine until they react catastrophically. The need for an early, accurate diagnostic test has been screaming loud in the medical literature for years. What if we could just read the signs before the body speaks? That's where this team stepped in. This study comes from a collaboration across some serious institutions. You've got BD Modena and colleagues from Modena Health and UC San Diego working alongside researchers from the University of Colorado and National Jewish Health, one of the most respected respiratory centers in the country. The paper dropped in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology Global in September of 2026. And what they decided to do was let an AI system be a better detective than humans have been. So here's what they actually did. They took nasal epithelial brushings, basically a little brush sample of the cells lining the inside of your nose, from 128 people. 71 of them had confirmed AERD. 57 did not. They extracted the messenger RNA, the mRNA, from those cells. Think of mRNA as the cell's to-do list, the active instructions being read right now about which proteins to make and what to do. They basically took a snapshot of the genetic activity in real time. Then they fed all that data into a machine learning system and asked it a simple question. Can you learn to tell the difference between AERD noses and non-AERD noses just by looking at which genes are turned up or down? The AI trained on most of the samples, learned the patterns, and then they tested it on a completely separate group of people it had never seen before. This is crucial. Anyone can build a model that works on the data it trained on. The real test is whether it works on new people. And here's where it got interesting. The results landed exactly where hope meets reality. First, the straightforward win. The AI model achieved genuinely impressive accuracy on the validation cohort. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in medicine is. But it was far better than what doctors had before. For the first time, you could take a nasal brushing, run the gene expression through this model, and get a reliable prediction of whether someone has AERD. That's the kind of tool that changes how a disease gets managed. But there was more. The study also dug into the clinical characteristics of AERD patients and found some patterns worth knowing. About 29% of AERD patients reported skin reactions when they were exposed to NSAIDs, things like urticaria, hives spreading across the body. Half of them experienced symptoms within an hour of taking the drug. Some waited longer. The reactions varied wildly between individuals. Some people have just respiratory symptoms. Others have gastrointestinal involvement. A few have full-body reactions that look almost like anaphylaxis, but aren't quite the same. The point being, AERD isn't one disease wearing one mask. It's a syndrome with multiple faces. What made the AI approach so powerful was that it could capture all that molecular complexity at once. The mRNA signatures weren't pointing to just one gene or one pathway. They were reading a constellation of differences in how AERD cells do business compared to normal cells. The immune system is doing something different. Inflammatory pathways are calibrated differently. Signal transduction is humming to a different tune. The AI didn't need to understand why those differences existed. It just needed to recognize the pattern and say, I've seen this before, and here's what it means. Now let's talk about what this actually changes in the real world. If this validation holds up across multiple medical centers and diverse patient populations, you're looking at a way to diagnose AERD before the first accidental NSAID reaction. That's not nothing. Right now, some people live for years without knowing. They take ibuprofen casually. Then one day, in their 20s or 30s or 40s, they have an AERD reaction they didn't see coming. Maybe they're alone when it happens. Maybe they're driving. A reliable early diagnostic test would change that equation. You'd know, you'd avoid the drugs, you'd get the right prophylactic treatment before crisis mode. The human cost of that is real. But be honest about the limitations here. 128 people is a solid starting cohort. It's not tiny. But AERD itself might be heterogeneous enough that a model trained on one population might not work perfectly on another. Geographic variation, genetic ancestry, age distribution, all of those could matter. The researchers were smart enough to use an external validation cohort, which is the right move. But external validation is not the same as clinical deployment. You'd want to see this tested across different health systems, different patient populations, ideally internationally, before a hospital actually starts swabbing noses and feeding data into this model. That takes time and money and coordination. Here's what this really signals about where medicine is going, though. We've spent the last several decades learning to read human genomes. Now we're learning to read the active genetic conversation happening in specific tissues right now. And we're teaching machines to recognize patterns in that conversation that humans can't see directly. That's a fundamental shift. For decades, diagnosis relied on observable symptoms or measurable markers. Blood tests, imaging, patient reports. Increasingly, it's going to rely on AI systems that can see patterns in high-dimensional data that our brains simply aren't wired to detect. Some people think that's terrifying. Some people think it's inevitable. Most people haven't thought about it yet. The bigger question that this study raises but doesn't answer is about speed and accessibility. Right now, this kind of molecular analysis isn't available at your local clinic. It's a research tool. Getting the infrastructure in place to make nasal epithelial mRNA profiling routine would require investment and coordination. It would require training. It would require making sure that AI diagnostics don't just serve wealthy people in major medical centers. That's the gap between a brilliant research finding and a technology that actually changes how medicine works. This study does the former brilliantly. The latter is still being written. Here's the core revelation, though. Your nose is already broadcasting secrets about your health. Your cells are expressing genes in patterns that predict disease risk. We just built a machine that can listen, and that machine is getting better at translation every single month. The question isn't whether AI will diagnose rare diseases earlier and more accurately than doctors can. It's when that becomes routine and whether we're ready for what happens next. Turns out, scientists have been busy, and they're not done yet.